Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. For as long as I can remember, my parents have been the ones who made the holidays happen, especially Christmas and Thanksgiving. Their house became the gathering place, the heart of both sides of the family, where every tradition, every smell, every familiar piece of decor seemed to pull everyone back into a shared past. Christmas was always on my dad's side, Thanksgiving rotated with my mom's side, but somehow more often than not, my parents still ended up hosting. They didn't do things halfway. Hosting in our family wasn't just tidy up the main areas or throw some dishes in the oven. No, my parents went all out. The week before a big holiday, our house transformed into a construction site of sorts. All hands on deck, me, my sister back when we both lived at home, and my parents, each with assigned tasks. My mom would have her list: upstairs living room, downstairs living room, dining room, kitchen, laundry room, bathrooms, and even that small raised platform where she displays her nutcracker collection. No one ever goes up there, and from most angles you can't even see it, but it still had to be dusted, polished, and perfect, because that's just how they are. Our house isn't huge, but it's big enough that cleaning every corner took several hours, even with everyone helping. I remember years when we'd still be running the vacuum at midnight on Christmas Eve, just to make sure every inch of carpet had that fresh vacuum line pattern. It was exhausting, but when guests arrived and the lights twinkled on the tree and the smells of roasting turkey and cinnamon drifted through the air, it felt worth it. Back then, everyone seemed happy to come. They'd praise the decorations, the food, the cozy feeling of the house. My parents took pride in that. They worked hard for it, and for a long time it felt like they were genuinely appreciated. But as the years passed, I started to notice something. The appreciation didn't extend much beyond the day itself. People would enjoy the feast, laugh in the living room, and then as soon as dessert was over, they'd be gone. My parents would stand in the quiet aftermath, looking at the stacks of plates, the crumbs on the tablecloth, the water rings on the coffee table, and know they were in for another full day of work just to put the house back in order. About 5 years ago, my parents decided to stop hosting Thanksgiving altogether. They didn't make a big announcement, just quietly said they wouldn't be doing it anymore. I think part of it was physical exhaustion. They're in their mid-50s now, and while that's not old by any means, it's old enough that pulling all-nighters to clean and then cooking for 15 people in one day takes a bigger toll. But part of it, I think, was emotional. When you put that much effort into something and the people you're doing it for barely check in with you outside of the holidays, it starts to feel less like a family tradition and more like an obligation no one else is willing to share. Christmas, though, that they kept doing, especially on my dad's side. It was almost automatic. As soon as Thanksgiving ended, my parents would start prepping for Christmas dinner. But this year was supposed to be different. My sister is off on a cruise until after the new year, and I've been out of the house for years now. That leaves my mom and dad to do all the work themselves. So they decided to scale it back. A small, intimate Christmas with just my dad's mom, my Aunt Elle, my Aunt C, and Uncle Jay, my cousin, and me. That was it, manageable. It should have been simple, but of course, in my family, nothing involving the holidays is ever simple. The plan was solid. For once, Christmas was going to be simple. No endless guest list, no frantic cleaning marathons, no 15 different dishes to keep warm in the oven at the same time. My parents were looking forward to a calm, cozy evening with a handful of people they genuinely enjoyed being around. The invite list was deliberate, not meant to offend anyone, but simply to keep things manageable. Enter Aunt Elle. Now, Aunt Elle has always been unpredictable. She's not the kind of person who thrives on subtlety. If there's drama to be found, she'll sniff it out, and if there isn't any, she's more than willing to create some. This time she decided the small gathering idea was unacceptable, not because she actually wanted to help, or because she felt my parents were making a mistake, but because she didn't like that her kids weren't invited. And rather than addressing it with my mom or dad directly, she went straight into broadcast mode. Within days, she'd told another aunt, and then somehow it spread. My mom's phone started blowing up with concerned texts and pointed questions. Apparently, the idea that my parents could choose to have a smaller Christmas without inviting the entire extended family was seen as a crime against tradition. The worst part, Aunt Elle didn't stop at grumbling to other relatives. She actually cornered my grandmother, my dad's mom, about it. She ranted at her, filling her head with the idea that she'd been excluded from some grander family plan. She conveniently left out the fact that my grandma was still invited. By the time my parents found out about the conversation, my grandma had already called to say she wasn't coming. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was upset by whatever Aunt Elle had put in her head. To make matters worse, there's a lingering shadow from an old family feud that's never fully gone away. 6 years ago, there was an argument, one of those messy, tangled things where two people fought, and suddenly their spouses and siblings and second cousins were all pulled into it. It started when the sister of a hospitalized family member got into it with the guy, wife. Even after he was released from the hospital, those two never made up, and their feud still dictates who will and won't come to certain gatherings. It's like a quiet, invisible minefield my parents have had to navigate every holiday since. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't about Christmas. It wasn't even about who got invited. It was about control. Aunt Elle didn't like not having a say in the guest list, so she stirred up trouble until the whole thing became bigger than it ever needed to be. And here's the thing, my parents weren't trying to hurt anyone. They just wanted a Christmas they could actually enjoy without being so exhausted they collapsed into bed as soon as the guests left. But in this family, scaling back is treated like a personal insult. After the fallout from Aunt Elle's little information campaign, my mom was torn. She's not confrontational by nature. If anything, she's the family peacekeeper. Her instinct is always to smooth things over, even when she's not the one at fault. So it didn't surprise me when she started talking about sending an apologetic text to the people who felt left out, explaining why they weren't invited and reassuring them it wasn't personal. She sat at the kitchen table one night with her phone in hand, frowning at the screen like it might hold the right words if she stared at it long enough. "I just don't want anyone thinking we don't care," she said. "Maybe if I explain how much work it is for us now, how tired we get, it'll make sense." I knew where this was going. She'd pour her heart into a message that was too soft, too apologetic, and it would only feed into their belief that they were owed an explanation in the first place. In our family, an apology, especially when you haven't done anything wrong, doesn't calm the storm. It tells certain people that their complaints work, that if they push hard enough, you'll back down. That's when I gave her my version of what she should say. If they want someone to host so badly, they can host for the family. We're tired of putting in all the effort just to clean up the mess afterward by ourselves. Blunt, sure, but also true. For years, my parents have been the default hosts, not because it was agreed upon, but because no one else ever stepped up. They've spent days cooking, decorating, cleaning before and after, and for what? A single afternoon of family togetherness, followed by radio silence from most people until the next holiday rolled around. My dad, sitting in his recliner with his arms crossed, took it even further. Don't suggest they host, they should already be offering. If they wanted to, they would, and if they don't, then they can keep their mouths shut. It's one of the few times I've seen him dig his heels in this hard. Usually he just lets my mom handle the diplomacy. But this time he didn't even want her sending a message at all. His reasoning was simple. If someone is upset because you chose to do less for your own sanity, that's their problem, not yours. Still, I could see it in my mom's eyes. She was going to send something. Not because she felt guilty, but because she couldn't stand the idea of tension hanging in the air between her and the rest of the family. And she'd probably be too nice in her wording, offering more grace than they ever extended to her. Meanwhile, I sat there thinking about how we'd gotten to this point. How the same people who never called my parents outside the holidays now felt entitled to dictate who should be invited to Christmas in their home. How Aunt Elle, in particular, seemed to thrive on stirring up resentment, then stepping back to watch it spread. The irony was almost laughable. The people most offended about not being invited were the ones who never lifted a finger when it came to hosting. And deep down, I think my parents knew that no message, apology or not, was going to change that. The truth is, this year's Christmas mess didn't just appear out of thin air. It was the product of years of small slights, quiet feuds, and unspoken scorekeeping that built up like layers of dust no one bothered to clean. It all goes back, at least in my mind, to that blow-up 6 years ago. A family member had been hospitalized, and his sister and wife ended up in an argument so ugly that it split gatherings in two. I don't even remember what the original fight was about, but it became one of those lines-in-the-sand situations. One side wouldn't apologize, the other refused to forgive, and suddenly holiday invitations were being filtered through a mental seating chart. If she's there, I'm not going. It was petty, but it stuck. Ever since then, hosting meant navigating a minefield. My parents would spend weeks deciding not just who to invite, but how to invite them in a way that didn't trigger the other side. And because they were the ones willing to host, they also became the ones responsible for making sure everyone else's grudges didn't ruin the day. But grudges have a way of creeping in no matter how carefully you tiptoe. Someone would overhear someone else making a joke or spot a relative talking to the enemy, and the cold shoulders would start. I've seen it happen right in our living room, people who used to be close sitting on opposite sides of the room, speaking only in clipped, polite sentences if at all. My parents would pretend not to notice, but I could see the tension in the way my mom's smile got tighter, the way my dad poured himself another drink before dessert. And then there's Aunt Elle. She's always had this talent for knowing exactly which buttons to push. She remembers every slight, real or imagined, and she never forgets who owes her. If someone once ignored her opinion on a recipe or didn't make a big enough fuss over her birthday, she files it away. She's the kind of person who can take a neutral situation like this year's small Christmas guest list and twist it into a personal insult. That's what she did when she found out her kids weren't invited. It wasn't enough for her to feel disappointed. She had to make it into a statement, proof in her mind that my parents were taking sides or playing favorites. And instead of talking to them directly, she went for the nuclear option: gossip. She told another aunt, knowing it would spread. She cornered my grandma, knowing her reaction would hit harder. She planted seeds and then stood back to watch them grow. This is what makes hosting so exhausting for my parents. It's not just the cleaning or the cooking, it's the constant mental calculus of keeping people from using the day as a stage for their unresolved drama. And this year, they decided they were done with it. But the thing about walking away from someone else's game is that they don't always let you. Some people, like Aunt Elle, would rather drag you back in than admit you have the right to set boundaries. That's why this small Christmas became a full-blown controversy. It wasn't really about the holiday. It was about control, resentment, and the idea that my parents' home somehow belongs to the whole family by default. The sad part, I think my parents knew this would happen. I think that's why they kept the guest list so small in the first place, to keep the old wounds out of the room. But as I watched all this unfold, it hit me: in this family, the drama doesn't need a seat at the table. It'll show up on its own. In the end, my mom did what I suspected she would do. She wrote the text. I watched her type it out at the kitchen table, her thumbs moving slowly, carefully choosing each word so it wouldn't come off as hostile. She kept it short and polite, explaining that she and my dad just didn't have the energy to host a large gathering this year, that they were keeping it small so they could actually enjoy the day. No digs, no pointed comments, just a soft explanation. She read it out loud to my dad before hitting send. He didn't say much, just leaned back in his chair and muttered, "It's too nice." And it was. But that's my mom. Her default setting is diplomacy, even when the other side is sharpening knives. The responses trickled in over the next day. Some were short, okay messages, the kind that drip with passive-aggressive disapproval. Others didn't respond at all. And then there was Aunt Elle. Predictably, she didn't reply directly to my mom, but my cousin texted me later to say that she was telling people about the message, spinning it as though my parents had apologized for not inviting everyone, which of course wasn't the case at all. My dad saw the writing on the wall. "They're gonna talk about this for the next 3 Christmases," he said, half amused, half resigned. He wasn't wrong. In this family, nothing fades quietly. Every disagreement gets stored away for later, like an ornament you keep in the attic until it's time to hang it back up. The closer we got to Christmas Day, the more I realized my parents had actually made the right choice. There was no frantic deep cleaning this year, no marathon cooking session with timers going off every 10 minutes, no whispered arguments about who left streaks on the bathroom mirror. The house still looked beautiful, the food still smelled amazing, but there was a different energy, lighter, calmer. When the day finally came, it was exactly what they'd hoped for. My grandma ended up coming after all, brought by Aunt C and Uncle Jay. We sat around the table, ate, laughed, and for once there wasn't a single icy stare or whispered side comment. No one rushed to leave, no one sat in tense silence. It felt normal, and I couldn't remember the last time a holiday had felt that way. After everyone left, the cleanup was minimal. My parents sat together in the living room, drinking coffee and watching the lights twinkle on the tree. There was no exhaustion in their faces, no unspoken frustration hanging between them, just relief. I thought about Aunt Elle and the others who decided to make a production out of being excluded. I knew the gossip would keep swirling, that this Christmas would be added to the mental list of things to bring up later. But sitting there with my parents in the quiet, I realized something important: none of that actually mattered. Because here's the truth: the holidays are supposed to be about joy, about spending time with the people you actually want to be around. And if that means closing the door to those who bring more stress than warmth, so be it. My parents had drawn their line in the snow this year, and they'd stood by it. And maybe, just maybe, it's the start of a new tradition, one where peace at the table matters more than the number of chairs around it.